Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of WYTPod, the online community for e-commerce business owners and entrepreneurs. Today, we have a very special guest with us. He's the founder at Stylist, and his name is Garik Himebaugh. Garik, thank you for joining us today. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great, Mark. Thanks so much for having me.
It's our pleasure. All right, so let's jump right into it. And just so that our viewers can get to know you a little better, would you mind sharing some of your background with us?
Sure. Yeah. So I started Stylist, which is a social enterprise. I started that over 4 years ago, and kind of like a little bit before that, I kind of worked in like various industries. So I studied like peace studies in essentially in college, and then I kind of like did some jobs in like financial, like commercial real estate essentially, and wasn't really finding my fit there. And then I found my way into like a job with like like really light development work and like SQL, and then basically I ended up in grad school for business, and I was trying to figure out like I was trying to like change things kind of for myself and um hop into a different career path. And it was while I was in grad school that I was kind of working on a startup, and which eventually evolved into EcoStylist. It was something different at first. um and yeah, so that's kind of a little bit about my background. So I got a grad school in business, but I kind of started this immediately after graduating, and they've just been doing this ever since.
Cool. So you were a programmer at some stage? Is that right?
Not exactly. That would be, I would say that's too strong of a word for me. I mean, it was like pretty light. I was supposed to be a implementation engineer essentially. They were calling the role like business analyst, but we were setting up their software for their clients essentially.
Yeah.
And but it was supposed to be super easy, but like, the software just like wasn't that it just wasn't that good, let's just say. And so so it needed to be customized, and so I had to like kind of learn. um yeah, I had to basically learn like SQL so that I could customize their software for their clients. And but again, it was kind of like, it was pretty light stuff. It wasn't nothing like too advanced.
Okay, but still, though, those are kind of most people would think that those are divergent ways of thinking. So, right? I mean, you don't associate fashion with programming most of the time, I guess. So you chose this path. I guess that's good for everyone now. Um, so going through your website, I mean, I really appreciate your mission and what you're trying to do, and that's commendable. Now, we know that, when manufacturers claim that they use renewable materials, sustainable materials, and that they provide a good, healthy, safe work environment, unfortunately, a lot of times those claims are false. And it's hard to find the good guys and separate them from the bad guys. So that's what, in my opinion, makes what you're doing so important, because um, I'm a guy who would like to do that. I'd like to support the good guys, the ethical guys out there. I'm just not sure if I'm, actually doing it or not. So if you're doing that hard work for a lot of people so that they can sort of close their eyes and buy from someone and feel good about it, that's a great thing. So can you tell us what made you decide to get into this exactly? And how is it that you actually find the good guys out there? How do you determine who they are?
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good summary in a way of what we do in terms of like
Oh,
separating.
sorry. I
No,
guess,
no, it is though. Yeah, because like I guess I should mention that quickly because I don't think yeah, so essentially we're a resource for sustainable and ethical fashion for people to use. And so um basically, like, kind of like the opposite of fast fashion, because fast fashion would be sort of like the worst case scenario from a sustainability perspective in fashion right now. Um
yeah, can you talk about that for a second? Because read about that and I never thought about that before, but I read about that on your website and I think that's interesting. Fast fashion
yeah,
versus, yeah.
Yeah, no, it definitely puts the whole industry in perspective, because I think it's like, on the one hand, on the one hand, we have like, brands that are being like more sustainable and ethical than ever before, and those are the brands that we're helping you find and support, right? And that's really awesome. Like, it's really encouraging. But there's another side of the coin, and that's like the fashion industry is also, in some ways. I mean, you could argue obviously some things have changed in, for the better, obviously, with time. with fashion, but like a lot, in some ways it's worse than ever before, because of fast fashion. And so what that means for sort of anyone who's not familiar with the fashion industry is, basically Zara was like the pioneer of fast fashion, but there's other brands like H&M, that were kind of like right there with them and in starting it. And essentially it was like a faster means of production, right? It was instead of making two collections a year
Yeah.
of clothes, like, yeah, because that used to be the thing, right? Your brands would have like two collections a year, and it was like a big deal, and there were these fashion shows. And then fast fashion was like, well, if we could drop a collection like every week, we could sell way more clothes. And so it kind of like, it was this whole model that was like really good for them. It was really good for business, right? It was really good for demand. And then it's basically just gotten like turned up like even more. So it went from like one collection a week to now you have brands, now you have brands like the Chinese brand Shein that drops like, thousands of items per day, not per week, like per day. um and so it's just been like and at that speed, what's happening, and the prices like went way down, and so people like have also gotten really used to paying nothing for clothes. But when you look behind the door, what's happening is like they're cutting a lot of corners on the environment. They're not paying people fairly. Like there was just an investigation that found people working at Shein working like what was it, working like 80-hour weeks, and
Oh, wow.
like getting like yeah, not getting like no days off. Like I think they were getting one day off per month, like including weekends, like one day off per month. um if they made a single mistake, they would get 2/3 of their pay docked for the entire day. um
Draconian. Whoa, that's horrible.
like this sort of thing, yeah. And so that's what's happening, and so that's happening simultaneously kind of in the fashion industry, and it's basically getting worse. And so yeah, so I saw this problem, and I was like, we need a resource that can help people support brands that are doing things the right way. Especially like paying people fairly is a big part of our criteria, and almost every brand that we certify guarantees living wages. Like that's one of the big things in our assessment. And so yeah, so basically that's what we're doing, and as well as making clothes more sustainably, right, using more sustainable fabrics, all of that. So basically we created this resource to help, because like and I don't want to recommend people do it on their own in terms of like, I mean, no, I mean, I could certainly tell people how to do it, but it's obviously like it's really hard. Like there's a lot of things you need to look at. We look at a lot of things, like our research
Okay.
assessment. We're looking at still like a lot of factors and brands. So what I really recommend is just like use a resource like us, like use EcoStylist, to help you like sift through the noise and just find the good brands to support and make it really easy.
Great. I think this Shein, they have huge marketing budgets, because even a guy like me, I can't escape from them online. They're everywhere. So they're really hard to fight. It's like the evil empire fighting those guys, I think, right? Well, the
Yeah,
only
well,
thing,
because they have so much money.
yeah, exactly. Right. So they have
Yeah.
gigantic marketing budgets, and all of the sheep out there are like, yes, I will buy a new. Wow, I need a new red t-shirt. I bought one last week, but it's crazy. What I learned about fashion, only thing I know, I was taught that instead of buying a whole bunch of clothes that are less expensive, and you kind of like them, then buy fewer clothes, which are really high quality, are going to last a long time, and are going to be in fashion next year, and build your wardrobe like that. Am I on the right track?
Yes, no, you're absolutely right. That is exactly right. Because there's actually the thing about fast fashion that people never realize, like people get really attached to it because they like having the choice. It's part of like this it's part of what's happening in our society with infinite choices, right? It's like with
Yeah.
dating, people just keep swiping, and then with like fashion, it's like infinite choices. And people think that makes them happier. People think like if I can spend $2 on a dress and I can have 1,000 dresses, I'm happier. But actually research shows the opposite. Research actually shows that makes people less happy. Because what's really basically they're never satisfied. But the brands make a lot of money on you being never satisfied. That's what you need to realize. The
Yeah.
brands are not like, they're not actually doing you a favor. Like they're not selling you a $5 dress to make you happy. They're doing it because you will never be satisfied, so you'll always be buying from them. And you'll be trapped in
Right.
this cycle. Whereas in reality, if you bought less things and you committed to them, like if you spent $100 on a dress, but you really liked it, and then let's say like you wore it for years and you loved it, and then let's say, I know I'm using dress as an example here, and we're like two guys talking, but it's it could be anything, right? And it's like, but let's say 2 years later it doesn't fit you anymore, and instead of like throwing it out and buying a new $5 dress, let's say you got it tailored, right? And the thing is like, and then you loved it again and for like years. The thing is like, we don't recognize that could actually make us happier and save us money versus like continually buying these like cheap clothes in this never ending cycle.
Right. That shopping is a hobby for some of these people, and a lot of young people who haven't, they're not mature enough to maybe make great decisions about things like this, I guess I would say. I sound like an old guy right now, but that's our whippersnappers, but that's true. When you're a teenager or in your early 20s or something, then it's really easy. It's low hanging fruit to market to those people and sell them the same thing over and over again. So yeah, I'm glad there's people like you out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can actually borderline on like, it can actually become addictive behavior. I think like it can actually, become more than just like a habit. Like it can become, I think it can sort of become this addictive behavior where people are just shopping all the time, and yeah, and
To,
that's obviously not good.
yeah, to keep their depression at bay. The people are unhappy. There's constantly shopping and stuff. Anyway, I guess that's a long discussion we could have, but
Yeah.
but this is really fascinating. So now the next thing I would say is, that a lot of people have the concept that starting an e-com business is pretty easy. You just get some stock, you take pictures of it, you put it on the website, and now you're making sales, and it's that easy. But we know it's not that easy. So can you share some of the difficulties that you faced and how you overcame them?
Yeah, and it's definitely not easy for sure. Yeah, because I've been doing this for well, like I mentioned, like over 4 years, and I feel like I'm still learning just like so much all the time. Maybe every day, right? But yeah, I mean, for us, it's like it's interesting too because we don't. So we still haven't shipped into like a shopping cart model with our ecom business. So we're basically running it like as an affiliate marketplace where people, kind of like there's this one, I forget the name of it, but there's like a good example would be there's this one business that is like it curates products from Amazon, and it but it doesn't actually sell any of the products. It basically takes you to Amazon to buy them. I can't quite remember I think it might be Curate or something. Anyway, so that's kind of the way that we're functioning right now, in a similar way. And there's obviously challenges to that, right? Like on the one hand, there's maybe sure, it's like sure, there's definitely advantages, right? In some ways, like maybe it's easier to get, you could maybe get set up faster, right? Like you don't have to have inventory. So there's definitely some benefits, but there's also there's definitely some costs. You need a lot of volume, you need a lot of sales, right? Because it's lower margins, right? So
Right.
in that type of model, like in order to make in order, like you're trying to make money obviously to pay your team and everything, and it's like, yeah, and you need like a large volumes of sales. So that's definitely one disadvantage. Another one would be like, honestly, there's also sort of a data thing, right? When you have a shopping cart, you're collecting people's data. That's obviously really helpful too. So there's definitely like, I think I guess what I'm trying to highlight on here is with ecom businesses, there's different ways to do it, and there's definitely pros and cons to like all the approaches, and it's definitely really important, I think, to consider those, and then
Yep.
consider them, and then consider like what it is you actually want to do, and how you're going to do it. But yeah, it's definitely challenging. It's definitely challenging. There's also a lot of things you could be doing, and I think as I think when you start an ecom business, you'll sort of get at some point you'll start to get a lot of requests for, like, a lot of people will want to help you, and the thing in but like in a lot of different directions, and you'll have to you need to kind of know like what is like, what's the direction because you can't do everything, like you're
Yeah,
right, like
sure.
that's like you'll get people who want to help you with like TikTok ads and et cetera, and it's like you've got to kind of know like what is it that works for us, what should we be focusing on, and those are all sort of things we have to navigate.
Right. Makes total sense. And the garment industry is insanely competitive, right?
Yeah, I would say fashion's a pretty competitive space.
Yeah.
Probably because of, I mean, if I had to guess, it's probably because the growth. I don't actually know why people always. I don't actually, not actually sure why people get into it, but I think it's just because the growth rates. Like I think because the sort of continuous growth rates, people are probably like, oh, that's something I want to get into, and yeah, which is great. But I kind of, as I mentioned though too, I mean, there is like a problematic side to that. Like if like part of the reason that fashion is growing is these brands that are not not so great, but like yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's
And
it's
hard to
definitely a
compete
popular
with.
space. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So along those lines, one of the biggest challenges that e-commerce entrepreneurs face is marketing. So how are you driving potential customers to your website right now?
Yeah, so that's kind of like I mentioned, is yeah, the strategy is really important. So we're doing mostly an organic strategy at this point, where we're mostly like driving people organically, like SEO, Google. Um, And that's really been working for us. We've tried different things. I think there was a period where we were driving like a decent amount of our traffic through social media, but it's really shifted for us. So it's really more predominantly SEO at this point.
SEO, okay, great.
Yeah.
And who are your customers? What would you say is your core market?
Yeah, our core customer, I mean, obviously we have them like all over the spectrum, but our core customer is going to be, is in the US, like 25 to 34, basically has a college degree and like interested in environmental in some capacity. It could vary, right? Maybe they're interested, they care about sustainability, maybe they're interested in the environment, they go hiking, they do yoga, stuff like this. So, but basically, yeah,
Right.
that's kind of our core customer.
Except for the age, that's kind of me. Like I'm casual about, like I care, but honestly, I'm not that hardcore. I could do more, So I think that your site is built for someone like me who would I like to do the right thing, but doesn't want to spend hours of, my life researching it to make sure. And plus also I'm an analytical kind of person. So I'm afraid of making the wrong decision. So if I have to do all that research, it takes me forever to buy something. So this is a good solution for somebody like me, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I think there's people on like Reddit and stuff who are doing their own research, and that's great for them. But I think it's like most people don't want to do that, and then, like they should. And honestly, I'm not a proponent of it because like I mentioned, it's actually really hard to do your own research. And the thing is, like
You could be
also
wrong. You
if we're
could be
being honest,
wrong. And
you
then,
could be
yeah.
wrong. Yeah, and if we're being honest, you will be biased. That's the other thing. Like the one thing is, and like I mean everybody is, but like the thing is like we use a framework. So, we're not just saying like, yeah, we're not just like evaluating each brand one by one and then being like, oh, we'll give them 4 out of 5. Like that, like we use
Yeah.
a consistent framework for every single brand. So it's not so so it's not so slanted by things like our biases and things. And so yeah, I mean I think it's just if there's tools out there that make it easy, like yeah, then that's what we're trying. That's our whole thing, is like our whole goal was to help people support. Like I'll tell you how I got into the space was I actually met one of these brands that does like that we certify now, and like they had really great looking shoes and they pay living wages, and I was like really inspired by this and I bought the shoes like on the spot, and that was essentially like why the reason I started this was to help people find brands like that. I was like, I want to help people find these brands where it's like you can get a really high quality thing, like shoes, shirt, whatever, that like looks great, but it's like it has like a really great story. Like you're really supporting something great, in the
Yeah.
world. And so yeah.
Cool. I like shoes.
Yeah. Yeah, we have some really good shoe brands, like definitely. It's
Yeah, I was checking that out. All right. So
yeah.
finally, Garik, any sort of, pearls of wisdom that you'd like to pass along to entrepreneurs who want to get started in the e-commerce game?
Yeah, I think I would probably just hit on what I was sort of touching on earlier, the sort of like trying to stay focused thing, because I think that's been sort of like really on my mind a lot recently, and it's been sort of been like, yeah, so I feel like it's definitely relevant. I feel like it's been consistently relevant for me. It's something I think about a lot, where it's like really important to just stay to stay focused and commit to like a strategy. And what I mean by that is like is obviously it's kind of I think I think it is hard for anybody who starts anything, because it sort of goes against, like, when you're starting something, you also have to be open, right? Like you also need to intake information. So, and when you're being open, you're sort of like considering all the options, right? Like you're considering everything. And we sort of need to do that as, as anybody starting something. But I think that's why I think the staying focused thing is especially relevant for us, right? As like, as startup founders, as founders of like e-commerce platforms, like we have to be, I think we have to sort of like be like maybe define those parameters for ourselves. Like maybe like be like I'm in a learning period. I'm going to consider all my options for a week or a month, or right. If we have to, I think it's really effective to define that, and then close it. Then be like, okay, now I'm committing to a strategy, and then be like the strategy for my business is I'm going to focus on SEO, and I'm going to pair it with like email marketing. Let's just say, right. And then you're like commit to that for a while, and then maybe evaluate, like maybe you commit to it for a certain number of months, and then you like evaluate how it's going for you, and then if you need to consider new options. But I think what's really easy to happen in our space is like like the shiny object syndrome, where we're like, we think we're doing that. And then like, and then we see like Pinterest, and then we're like, oh, we should jump on Pinterest. And then you start like spending all this time focusing on Pinterest. And it's like, that can really, it can really dilute you, I think. And so I think, like I said, there's pros and cons to this, but I think it's just really important to sort of be conscious about like, what is your strategy? When are you opening and closing yourself to like new, because it's obviously we have to be learning and growing and considering, but we can't be doing it all the time or we'll be like
Yeah.
exhausted. So I think that would be sort of like my one thing to share.
Great point. I think oftentimes people who have enough energy and gumption and everything to actually get started are the kind of people who can become sidetracked at times and try to do too many things at once or do different things. I think that's really good advice. I think our community will appreciate that. And thanks again for joining us today, Garik. It was a pleasure speaking with you. Really good
Yeah,
stuff. And I love your website and I love your mission and your philosophy. And I wish you continued success.
yeah, thanks, Mark. Thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Same. Thanks, Garik.